Breaking news on Martyn Lucas Investor. We are looking at escalations between China and the US. We've seen the US put 100% tariffs on China effective 1st of November, and now we're seeing China fight back. The markets are down. We're expecting potentially to go into a bear market now. We're going to look at the charts for the S&P 500, the charts for crypto. But firstly, let's look at the news and what's causing today's move down in the markets. We've got Jerome Powell speaking later. We're covering it live on the show. So do check that out as well. But firstly, why is the markets down? We saw a massive crash on Friday in the crypto markets, a massive crash on Friday in the stock market. Then Trump tweeted on Sunday, everything is fine. The markets went back up, but now China is retaliating. So is everything fine, or are we going back to those lows of Friday and even lower? Well, let's look at the news first. China-US trade war escalates, tariffs, retaliation, and maritime tension. So what is going on between President Trump and Xi Jinping? The Trump administration has declared plans to impose 100% tariffs on imports from China effective November the 1st. Citing Beijing's new restrictions on rare earth exports and other strategic goods. In turn, China has vowed to retaliate and already begun countermeasures. It has imposed special port fees on US-linked ships and sanctioned US subsidiaries of South Korea's Hanwha Ocean for aiding American trade probes. The two countries have effectively begun applying symmetrical maritime levies on each other's vessels. So China is retaliating. The trade war has started. They have put on countermeasures. They are now putting an import fee. It's not directly a tariff, but they are now imposing import special port fees for any US-linked ships and sanctioned US subsidiaries of even the South Korea's ocean for aiding America's trade probe. So there is effectively there is now fees being put on any US trade within the area. So these moves come against a backdrop of a broader trade escalation. Remember, we predicted a crash on Friday. We put it in the newsletter. Martyn's been calling it for a while. Make sure you are subscribed. We are live every day. This is made during a live show. Do join us, and we go through the news every single day. Smash the like button if you haven't done so already. So China is defending its rare earth controls as lawful and insists that Washington rectify its erroneous practices or risk resolute measures. They are now threatening the United States of America. Meanwhile, both sides have begun imposing port fees. China's extra charges apply to US-owned, built or flagged ships, with exceptions for Chinese-built vessels, while the US introduced reciprocal levies on China-linked shipping lines to de-emphasize China's dominance in global maritime logistics. So, essentially, they're going back with extra import fees, port fees for any US-owned, built or flagged ships, the ones that have these markers on them, even if they are coming from South Korea, and that is a way to respond to the US. So the conflict has expanded beyond goods and tariffs into shipping and logistic infrastructure. We can expect Donald Trump to come and react to this once again. Will he? Won't he? Well, we might get another tweet that starts to push the market down. Remember, on Friday, 100% tariffs. On Sunday, everything's okay. Maybe on Tuesday or Wednesday, we get one more tweet from Trump that sends the markets lower. So the conflict has expanded beyond goods and tariffs into shipping and logistics infrastructure, a new front in statecraft. For investors, that means disruptions to global trade flows and cost pressures on exports and imports, and increased tail risk for supply chains. Watch for widening shipping cost spreads, jolts in freight indices, and early signs of counterparty stress among logistic firms. If the US and China stay on path, the trade war could broaden into a structural alignment of global maritime power and industrial flows. So let's have a quick look at the market and how the market's reacting. Firstly, if we start with the crypto market, we are down quite heavily on the crypto market. If you look at Bitcoin, we are, depending on what exchange you look at Bitcoin on, we are now approaching the lows of Friday. By the time you're watching this video, we might even be lower, but we are approaching the lows that we put in after that big correction. Let me get rid of that. to the downside on Friday after the initial tweets. As we said, we normally, after a big liquidation event, after a big move towards the downside, especially on Bitcoin, we expect a big rally upwards. And we did. We got a rally of about 6% on Bitcoin, much higher on the altcoins. We'll look at the altcoins in a second. But now, as we said, we expect the market to come back down. So this was expected, and we got this China news of a retaliation, and the markets are down. So Bitcoin's now down 4%, and the altcoins, as expected, are down even more, up to 16%. So if we look at some of these top altcoins as well, we can start looking at XRP. Remember the scam by Binance that took XRP down 70 to 77 cents. Let's look at a chart a bit more reasonable. And you're seeing the same thing occur. A lot of these altcoins had flash crashes. I'm not expecting to come all the way back down to these lows. If we do, then I expect we're in a bear market. But for something like XRP, we came down onto most exchanges. Most people could buy XRP for around $1.50. But what was more important to see was a break of $2.62 to go back into a high, a formation that can take us to all-time highs. However, unfortunately, with this news, we've got rejected from $2.62. We've put in a new lower high, and we are looking that XRP is going to head down to at least $2.30. If $2.30 doesn't hold, then that's when we come back down to potentially the $2 range, which is definitely not impossible and maybe even more likely at this point, these altcoins to come down a bit further. If you look at Ethereum as well, it's now at 3,900. We can expect that to go back down to its Friday lows of potentially 3,700 or 3,500. For XRP specifically, I mean, $2 is the most important level. If we start breaking $2 with daily candle closes, that's when we are in trouble. With Bitcoin, when I would start calling it to be more likely a bear market than a bull market, is if we have multiple daily candle closes below, if we have multiple daily candle closes below the level of 100,000. If we start staying below 100,000 for Bitcoin, that's when I would start saying in a bear market. Right now, I still think we will continue with the bull market. If you start looking at the stock market as well, with all of this, we're looking at the stock market, which hasn't opened yet for today, but by the time you're watching this, it has opened. If you're watching this as a video, if you're watching this live, obviously it's not open yet. But we're looking at the futures here of the S&P 500. Big crash on Friday. Sunday was the announcement of don't worry about China. We jumped quite heavily. Now today is retaliation from China, and we're going back down. So I wouldn't be surprised if the S&P 500 comes down further today towards those Friday lows. I expect many of these major ones to come back to their Friday lows. That's Bitcoin, that's potentially Ethereum, that's the S&P 500. On the altcoin front, because it was a massive liquidation event and that's what cascaded it down to much, much lower levels, I don't expect them to go down to their Friday lows anytime soon. So there is a difference between these higher market cap assets compared to the lower market cap altcoins. So that's the S&P 500. I do expect it to come down to its Friday lows, but everything does. Today's major catalyst is not actually going to be the tariff news from China or the retaliation news from China. It's going to be if we get a tweet from Trump. But the main catalyst today and what's going to shape the markets today is Jerome Powell's speech. There will be a link to that at the end of this video. Jerome Powell is speaking today. His final speech before the FOMC meeting that we're going to get later this month, his biggest speech since the Jackson Hole speech, which took the markets to the next leg up. If we get some really good news from Jerome Powell, it can eradicate all these losses and we can start moving higher. If we start getting some caution from Jerome Powell, if we start getting a hawkish Jerome Powell, where he starts talking about inflation, then we can expect the markets to go down further. If he starts talking about that shutdown from the US government and panicking that he's not getting any data and uncertainty, then that's when the market can start crashing down and we'll go to these Friday lows. So we are waiting for Jerome Powell to start speaking, and that's what can change the market. If you're looking at the commodities market, you can see that gold is up. Actually, it's selling off slightly now. It's down now, sort of flat on the day after hitting one of its first major bull market targets. We are still expecting gold and silver to perform well. Silver is coming down to potentially test its previous all-time high of $50 an ounce. So everything is down today, including now the commodities market. Bitcoin dominance is heading up. Bitcoin is the safer place to be, and that's why Bitcoin dominance is moving towards the upside. But there will be 2 videos for you to watch up here. Take care of yourselves and each other.